Consideration, rule, scripts. A contract must be supported by consideration, a bargain for exchange of legal value. What is a bargain for exchange? Here's our rule script. A bargain for exchange exists when there is a legal detriment to the promisee, an obligation to do or not to do. Rule 1. A contract must be supported by consideration, a bargain for exchange of legal value. Rule 2. A bargain for exchange exists when there is a legal detriment to the promisee. A bargain for exchange exists when there is a legal detriment to the promisee. This is crucial. We don't have consideration unless there is a legal detriment to the promisee. What is that? Maybe money, maybe an obligation to do something, or to refrain from doing something. A bargain for exchange exists when there is what? A legal detriment to the promisee. Okay, one last principle here. The principle of mutuality of obligation. Unless both parties are bound, neither are bound. Unless both parties are bound, neither are bound. Okay, will courts inquire into the adequacy of consideration? This is rule 4. No, courts will generally not inquire into the adequacy of consideration. But we do have an unless. Unless there is a grossly disproportionate exchange, in which case it may be questioned. Okay, so what is not consideration? You know this. Moral or past consideration, gratuitous consideration, none of those are consideration. Moral consideration, not consideration. Gratuitous consideration, past consideration, none of those are consideration. What is our consideration substitute? That's right, it's promissory estoppel. Promissory estoppel is a consideration substitute. Here are 3 elements. There was a promise made to the offeree. The offeree relied on the promise to their detriment. And 3, justice requires enforcement. Okay, let's run through those rules. Rule number 1, a contract must be supported by consideration, a bargain for exchange of legal value. 2, a bargain for exchange exists when there is a legal detriment to the promisee. Courts will generally not inquire into the adequacy of consideration. However, a grossly disproportionate exchange may be questioned. And what is not consideration? Moral, gratuitous, or past consideration. And finally, our consideration substitute, promissory estoppel. 1, a promise was made to the offeree. The offeree did what? Relied on the promise to his detriment. And 3, justice requires enforcement. One more thing. Under consideration, we have our implied promises. Under the common law, there is an implied promise to use one's best efforts if there is an exclusive agreement. Under the UCC, there's only an implied promise of good faith, but there's one UCC wrinkle. A requirements contract, meaning the seller will use his best efforts to supply the goods, requires both parties to make a good faith determination of the quantities needed. Okay, common law, best efforts, Wood versus Lucy for an exclusive contract. UCC, if we have an exclusive contract, which is usually a requirements contract, both seller and buyer must make a good faith determination of quantities needed, and the seller must do what? Use his best efforts to supply the goods, and that is consideration.